right, so today we're going deep on Willie Haggart.
Okay.
And this is the name that, like, echoes through Jamaica's dance hall scene.
Yeah,
It carries a certain weight, I'd say.
definitely. Yeah.
But what's so interesting about this is we're going to be building this picture, like, entirely from his Wikipedia page.
Oh, wow.
So it's all out there in the open.
Right.
But how much can we really learn about a man like this from, like, a readily available source?
Yeah, that's the question, right?
Yeah.
It's almost like we're starting with this common thread,
Mm.
like a digital breadcrumb trail and seeing where it leads.
Okay.
And you would think like a Wikipedia article would be pretty straightforward, but even the basics of Haggart's life offer some intrigue right from the start.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, right off the bat, you see that his nickname, Willie Haggart, isn't even his real name.
Oh, really?
Yeah, he was born William Augustus Moore
Okay.
in Kingston, Jamaica in 1961.
Okay.
But that nickname, Willie Haggart,
Yeah.
it's a patois-like twist on hog heart. What do you make of that?
Well, I think you have to consider the cultural context, right?
Hmm.
Patois is like, it's more than just slang.
Yeah,
It's infused with history resistance and a distinct Jamaican identity.
right.
So to have a nickname rooted in patois already suggests a certain like street credibility,
Okay.
a connection to the heart of Kingston, you know.
Right.
But hog heart,
Yeah.
that implies toughness, resilience,
Oh, yeah, for sure.
maybe even a hint of danger.
Yeah, it definitely sets the tone.
Right.
And the article mentions that he was running with a crew called the Wild Bunch, led by a guy they called General Starkey.
Oh, wow.
Now, that sounds like a story waiting to be told.
Right. There's a real sense of mystery surrounding this period of his life.
Yeah.
The article just like mentions that Haggart moved overseas sometime after Starkey was murdered in 81.
Mm-hmm.
But there's no details on like where he went,
Yeah,
what he did.
Yeah.
Just a blank space in the timeline.
the big question mark.
It just fuels your curiosity.
It really does. And it's even more intriguing when you consider his early run-ins with the law.
Oh, okay.
First, conviction for unlawful possession back in 1980.
Hmm.
Then a couple more marijuana possession charges in 93.
Okay.
You have to wonder, was he already deeply involved in the criminal underworld during those overseas years?
It's definitely possible.
Yeah.
And then there's this robbery with aggravation charge from 95.
Right.
It was dismissed.
Yeah.
What happened there?
Yeah.
Was it a lack of evidence, influence, or something else entirely?
Right.
The Wikipedia entry leaves us with more questions than answers.
Which is kind of the point of a deep dive, right?
Exactly.
We're not just here to read off facts.
Right.
We're looking for those gaps, those inconsistencies
Yeah.
that make you want to dig deeper.
For sure.
And then, boom, we hit the dance hall era.
Okay.
Willie Haggart becomes a major player in the scene,
Right.
especially through his connection with Bogle and the infamous Black Roses crew.
And this is where things get really interesting.
Yeah.
Because you can't talk about Willie Haggart without understanding the power and influence of dancehall in Jamaica. It's not just music.
Yeah.
It's a cultural phenomenon.
Right.
A way of life with global reach.
So for him to rise within that world,
Yeah.
it must have taken a certain charisma,
Right.
a presence that went beyond just being tough.
Absolutely. And you see that reflected in the Willie Bounce.
Okay.
A dance move created in his honor.
Wow.
Think about it. To have a dance move named after you, that's iconic.
That's legacy.
That's leaving your mark on the culture.
Talk about legacy.
Right.
Okay, so we have the tough guy image,
Yeah.
the hints of criminal activity, the dance hall fame.
Uh-huh.
But what about his personal life?
Right.
The Wikipedia article mentions that he married Angela Little Miss Moore in 93,
Okay.
and they had 2 children together.
Your children. Okay.
But then comes this unexpected detail.
Oh.
Haggart acknowledged having 18 children before his death.
18. Yeah.
And the article even hints that more may have come forward later.
Wow, that complicates the picture a bit, wouldn't you say?
18 children.
Yeah.
That's a lot to unpack.
That is
What does that tell us about the man?
right.
Was he devoted father to all of them?
Yeah.
Or was this more about image? A way to solidify his status within the community?
It raises questions about his role as a father, his relationships,
Yeah.
how he navigated family life within the context of his other activities.
Right.
It's a layer of complexity that you don't often see explored in these like brief biographical sketches.
Yeah, and it's a reminder that there's always more to the story than what's readily apparent.
Absolutely.
Yeah, we're starting to see the multifaceted nature of Willie Haggart. And that brings us to the dramatic end of his story.
Okay.
2001, shot by unknown assailants alongside 2 of his friends.
A tragic and unfortunately not uncommon ending for figures who navigate the criminal underworld.
Yeah.
But it's his funeral that adds another layer of intrigue to this whole narrative. Okay.
An estimated 5,000 people attended,
Wow.
including high-ranking government officials.
Whoa, hold on. Government officials at the funeral of a known gangster.
Yeah,
Now that's something you don't see every day.
exactly. And this wasn't just any funeral.
Right.
It was a spectacle, a public display of mourning on a grand scale.
Wow.
It speaks to the complex relationship between politics, crime, and public perception in Jamaica,
Okay.
particularly within Kingston's inner-city communities.
Now I'm really starting to see why Willie Haggert's story has resonated for so long.
Yeah,
It's not just about dance hall or crime.
right.
It's about navigating a system where the lines are often blurred,
Uh-huh.
where allegiances shift, and where power operates in nuanced ways.
It's a story that forces you to confront your own assumptions about good and bad, right and wrong. And that's the power of a figure like Willie Haggart.
Yeah.
He defies easy categorization.
It's like we're piecing together a puzzle where the image keeps changing as you add more pieces.
We have the tough guy, the criminal, the dance hall icon, the complex family man,
Yeah.
and now this almost mythical public figure whose funeral draws a massive crowd, including those in power.
And through it all, we're still relying on this readily available Wikipedia article.
Right.
It makes you wonder what other stories are hidden in plain sight,
Yeah,
waiting to be examined, unpacked, and understood.
that's a great point. We often underestimate the power of these accessible sources. It's
Yeah.
like we're just scratching the surface here,
Uh-huh.
and there's a whole world of depth waiting to be explored.
For sure.
But before we get ahead of ourselves,
Right.
let's dive into this Wikipedia article a bit further.
Okay.
See what other insights we can glean about Willie Haggart's impact and legacy.
Sounds good. You know, it's fascinating how Haggart's legacy is kind of woven into the fabric of dancehall music. The Wikipedia article mentions all these big names:
Right.
Junior Cat, Beanie Man, Elephant Man, Spraga Benz, even Buju Banton,
Wow.
who reference him in their songs.
That's not just a passing mention, is it?
No.
It speaks to a level of respect,
Right.
almost reverence within the dancehall community.
Yeah.
These artists are like keeping his memory alive through their music.
It's like a form of oral history, you know,
Hmm.
passing down stories and legends
Right.
through rhythm and rhyme.
And when you think about the global reach of dancehall,
Yeah.
it means Willie Haggart's name is echoing far beyond the streets of Kingston.
Absolutely.
And that makes those government officials at his funeral even more intriguing.
Right.
Were they there out of genuine respect?
Mhm.
Was it a political calculation?
Yeah.
Or maybe a recognition of the influence he held within the community?
It's a question that gets at the heart of power dynamics in Jamaica.
Yeah.
Was there a level of tolerance, even complicity, between those in authority and figures like Haggart?
Right.
Did his connection to the people, his status as a dance hall icon,
Right.
somehow bridge the gap between the underworld and the halls of government?
This Wikipedia article is really just a starting point, isn't it?
It is, yeah.
It's like a keyhole glimpse into a much larger story
Yeah.
about Jamaican society, the role of music and culture, the complexities of power and influence.
You start to see how someone like Willie Haggart could be both a product of his environment and a force shaping that environment.
Right.
He navigated the streets, the dance halls, the legal system,
Yeah.
and seemingly even had a certain level of acceptance from the political elite.
And then there's the family aspect.
Right.
18 acknowledged children.
18, yeah.
What was his role in their lives?
Yeah.
Was he a provider, a protector, a distant figure?
I'd be curious to hear their perspective.
Yeah.
Understand what it was like growing up with Willie Haggart as a father.
Right.
You know, we're getting glimpses of the public persona, the dance hall legend.
Right.
But what about the man behind the image?
That's what I find so captivating about these deep dives.
Yeah.
We're taking this readily available information,
Mm-hmm.
this Wikipedia article that anyone could access,
Right.
and using it as a springboard to explore deeper questions
Yeah.
about identity, family,
Yes.
community, and the very fabric of Jamaican society.
And what's remarkable is that we haven't even touched upon academic journals,
Right.
historical records, or in-depth biographies.
true.
This is just the tip of the iceberg.
It makes you realize how much knowledge is out there waiting to be uncovered
Sure.
if you just know where to look and how to connect the dots.
Absolutely.
And sometimes those connections lead to more questions than answers,
Right.
which is part of the thrilled.
That's the beauty of learning, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's an ongoing process,
Mhm.
a constant exploration.
Right.
We're not just passively absorbing information,
Hmm.
we're actively engaging with it, questioning it,
Right.
challenging our own assumptions along the way.
So what would you say is like the biggest takeaway for our listeners?
Mm.
What's the one thing you hope they walk away with after this deep dive into Willie Haggert's life?
I think it's the importance of looking beyond the surface,
Hmm.
whether it's a Wikipedia article, a
Yeah.
news headline,
Right.
or even just a casual conversation.
Okay.
There's always more to uncover, more layers to explore,
Yeah.
and that's what makes life and learning so fascinating.
Well said. And on that note, I think it's time to shift gears a bit.
Okay.
We've been focused on the information presented in this Wikipedia article.
Right.
But I'm curious, what are some avenues for further exploration?
Hmm.
Where could our listeners go to delve even deeper into Willie Haggert's world?
Well, there's so many possibilities.
Yeah.
For starters, they could look into the sources cited in the Wikipedia article.
Okay.
Often those will lead to more detailed accounts, different perspectives,
Right.
maybe even firsthand testimony.
And what about resources beyond text?
Yeah.
Are there documentaries, interviews, or even fictionalized accounts that offer a different lens on Haggert's life and the dance hall scene?
Absolutely. There's a wealth of material out there,
Okay.
especially in the realm of music and film.
Hmm.
Documentaries like Rise Up offer a great overview of dance hall culture and its impact, while films like Third World Cop provide a fictionalized glimpse into the complexities of crime and policing in Jamaica.
And for those who are really feeling adventurous,
Yeah.
a trip to Jamaica itself could be an incredible learning experience.
Oh, for sure.
Imagine immersing yourself in the culture, talking to people who knew Haggard,
Right.
experiencing the energy of a live dance hall session.
That's taking the deep dive to a whole new level.
Yeah.
And honestly, there's no better way to understand a place and its people than to experience it firsthand.
Right.
Talk to locals, visit historical sites,
Yeah.
soak up the atmosphere.
It's about connecting with the human stories behind the headlines.
Right.
The rhythms behind the music, the heart and soul of a place.
Exactly. And I have a feeling that's what Willie Haggart was all about.
Mm.
Living life to the fullest,
Yeah.
embracing the complexities, and leaving a mark that would continue to resonate long after he was gone.
So as we wrap up this part of our deep dive, I want to encourage everyone listening to go out there and explore.
Yeah?
Don't just take our word for it.
Right.
Dig deeper, ask questions, and discover your own insights.
Uh-huh.
Who knows, maybe you'll uncover something that even this Wikipedia article missed.
And that's the beauty of it all, isn't it?
Yeah.
There's always more to learn, more to discover, and more to share.
You know, it's amazing how just a single Wikipedia article
Right.
can spark like such a wide-ranging conversation.
It really can.
We've gone from Willie Haggart, the name,
Uh-huh.
to like a nuanced exploration of Jamaican culture,
Yeah.
the dance hall scene,
Right.
and even like the complexities of power and influence.
Absolutely. And that's the power of a deep dive, right?
Yeah.
It's not about memorizing facts and figures.
Right.
It's about using readily available information as a launchpad for deeper understanding.
Yeah.
And in this case, we've seen how a life story,
Mm-hmm.
even one as seemingly straightforward as presented in like a Wikipedia entry,
Right.
can illuminate these broader societal issues.
Absolutely. We've talked about crime,
Yeah.
poverty, the allure of dance hall,
Right.
the blurred lines between the underworld and the political elite.
Yeah, these are themes that resonate far beyond Willie Haggart's individual story.
Yeah. It makes you wonder,
Right.
what other stories are waiting to be told?
Mm.
What other perspectives are out there?
Yeah.
There must be countless narratives,
Mhm.
just as fascinating, just as complex,
Right.
hidden within the archives,
Yeah.
the communities, the very heartbeat of Jamaica.
And those stories deserve to be heard.
Yeah.
They enrich our understanding of the world,
Mm.
challenge our assumptions,
Right.
and remind us of the shared humanity that connects us all.
So as we wrap up this deep dive into the life of Willie Haggart,
Yeah.
I want to leave our listeners with a challenge.
All right.
Don't let this be the end of the exploration.
Right.
Go out there, be curious. Seek out those untold stories.
Read books, watch documentaries,
Yeah.
listen to the music.
Talk to people.
We-
Maybe even plan a trip to Jamaica someday.
That's a great idea.
Immerse yourself in the culture. Ask questions.
Yeah.
And discover those hidden gems of knowledge and insight.
Because the world is full of fascinating stories just waiting to be uncovered.
Right. And who knows?
Yeah.
Maybe one of you listening will be inspired to delve even deeper into Willie Haggart's life,
Hmm.
to write that definitive biography to
Right.
fill in those gaps
Yeah.
and share his story with the world.
Until then, let's keep the conversation going.
Yeah?
Share your thoughts, your insights,
Right.
your own deep dives into the topics that spark your curiosity.
It's all about sharing those deep dives.
Yeah, because learning is a journey best shared.
Well said. And with that, we'll sign off for today.
Okay.
But remember, this isn't goodbye.
Right.
It's just the beginning of a lifetime of exploration.
Keep diving deep. All right. Ready for a deep dive into something a little different today?
Definitely. Always up for a challenge.
This time, we're looking at an excerpt, The Royal Encounter. And let me tell you, it's a wild ride.
Oh.
How so? Picture this. Diddy and Jay-Z, at the top of their game, summoned to a late-night meeting with the Queen of England.
Okay, that's not your everyday meeting.
Not at all. And the excerpt doesn't waste any time setting an eerie tone. We're talking thick fog, London at night, the feeling of being watched.
Ah, the fog. Classic literary move, right? More than just weather. It's like a veil obscuring things, blurring what's real.
Exactly. And it's through this fog that they're whisked away to Buckingham Palace, but not the usual grand entrance you'd expect.
A side entrance, hidden corridors.
Okay.
Subtle difference, but speaks volumes.
Totally. The excerpt mentions damp corridors, those creepy paintings. Even Buckingham Palace has a hidden side. Makes you wonder, right? What's lurking beneath the surface of the places we think we know?
It's like the excerpt is telling us, don't be so sure about anything. And in this unsettling setting, that's when Diddy and Jay-Z come face to face with the Queen.
Or at least who they think is the queen, the way she's described. It's almost otherworldly. Not just your typical commanding presence, but something else.
I can imagine. You're Diddy, you're Jay-Z, you've reached the pinnacle of success, yet here you are, totally unnerved.
Makes you question, what does true power even look like?
Right. Is it the empires we build, or something ancient, untouchable? The excerpt really makes you think.
And just when you think it can't get weirder, the queen launches into this monologue, basically tells them their entire lives, their successes, were all part of a plan orchestrated by forces they can't even fathom.
Hold on. Orchestrated? By who?
That's the thing she doesn't say, just drops that bomb and lets it sink in. Talk about messing with someone's perception of free will, right?
It's like the ultimate power move, to not just have control, but to reveal that control to those who thought they were in control.
Chilling. I mean, don't talk about an existential crisis, right? Like, what's the point of striving if it was all predetermined?
Yeah, but then it gets even more interesting because the Queen, she doesn't just drop that bombshell and leave them hanging.
Oh, what'd she do?
She offers them a choice.
A choice? Like what? Become royalty.
Basically, join her.
Yeah.
Become part of this ancient power structure, or resist.
Okay, so classic join the dark side or fight for the light. But what are the stakes?
That's the thing. The excerpt doesn't spell it out. It's more like, join us, and you'll have unimaginable power. Resist, and, well, face the consequences.
Ooh, talk about a dilemma. Unimaginable power versus who knows what. How do you even process that?
It's like the ultimate gamble. And that's where the excerpt really gets you, because it's asking, what would you do? Choose power, maybe become a pawn in their game, or hold on to your principles, knowing it could mean losing everything.
Man, that's heavy. And we're talking about Diddy and Jay-Z here. These are guys who built empires, right? Used to being in control.
Right. But in this moment, they're totally out of their depth. Fearful, confused. It really highlights how far beyond the realm of normal human experience this is. They're in over their heads.
And then,
What?
that's it. The excerpt ends.
Seriously.
Yeah. It doesn't tell us what they choose, if they even have a real choice. We're just left with that uneasy feeling.
Wow. Talk about leaving you hanging.
It's like that fog that's been hovering around this whole time just swallows everything up, including any sense of resolution.
It's almost like we're being forced to confront that same uncertainty that Diddy and Jay-Z are feeling. Like, we think we have things figured out, but what if we're just seeing what we're allowed to see?
Ooh, that sends chills down my spine.
It's brilliant, but unsettling, right? The excerpt isn't giving us answers, it's making us ask bigger questions.
Yeah.
About control, about the true nature of power, about how much we really know about the world around us.
It's almost like the excerpt is saying, hey, you thought this was a trip? Buckle up, we're just getting started.
Yeah, it definitely leaves you wanting more. Like, where do Diddy and Jay-Z go from here? Which path do they choose? Or is there even a choice to be made?
I know. It's frustrating, but also kind of brilliant. Makes it feel way more real, you
Yeah.
know? Like, we want easy answers, but life usually throws us curveballs.
Exactly. And think about that last image, the fog swallowing the palace.
Yeah, creepy, but also kind of symbolic, right?
Totally. Like the line between what's real and what we perceive as real, it's not as clear as we'd like to believe.
Mm.
This whole encounter, this power structure Diddy and Jay-Z stumble into, it's hidden in plain sight. Just like the palace disappears into the fog.
Man, that's deep. Makes you look over your shoulder a bit, right? Like, what am I missing? What's really going on here?
That's the point. This excerpt, it's not just some fantasy, it's tapping into a very real anxiety we all have, that sense of, what if there's more to this story?
So what you're saying is conspiracy theories aren't so crazy after all.
Whoa, whoa, I wouldn't go that far. But it does make you question, right? Question the narratives we're told, the systems we think we understand, who's pulling the strings, how much control do we really have?
Big questions, man. And it all started with Diddy, Jay-Z, and a late-night invite to Buckingham Palace. Who knew?
It's amazing what fiction can do, right? This excerpt, it takes this outlandish premise, this royal encounter, and uses it to hold up a mirror to our own anxieties.
And it does it without giving us any easy answers, which just makes it stick with you even longer.
Exactly. We're left with this unsettling feeling, this urge to dig deeper, to question everything.
And that's what makes this deep dive so fascinating, right? It's not about the answers, it's about the questions. It's about prodding at those uncomfortable truths that lurk beneath the surface of our everyday lives.
Absolutely. This excerpt is like a doorway into a much larger conversation about power, control, and the illusions we cling to.
It's a reminder that even in fiction, especially in fiction, we can find profound truths that resonate with our own experiences.
And maybe, just maybe, those fictional tales can help us navigate the very real complexities of the world around us.
Well said. Big thanks to everyone for joining us on this mind-bending deep dive. We'll see you next time, same channel, for another plunge into the depths of thought-provoking content. Until then, stay curious and keep questioning everything. Hey everybody, welcome back to the deep dive. Today, we're going to be diving into some legal waters with a case that you sent over, Arnaud of Mimosshop. And it's a story about a musician, Mr. Arnaud, and his lawyers, and a whole lot of money. We're talking millions of dollars in unpaid music royalty.
Yeah, and this case
Yeah.
is really kind of an eye-opener when you look at how easily things can go wrong. Even for someone who wins a huge judgment, you would think that would be the end of it.
Yeah.
You know, he's got his money, but
Yeah.
it shows the importance of really understanding your rights,
Yeah.
especially when you're dealing with legal representation and contracts.
So let's kind of set the stage here. So Mr. Arnaud, he had originally sued Death Row Records
Yeah.
over some unpaid royalties, and he actually won a default judgment
Right.
for over $25 million. But as you know, getting a judgment and collecting a judgment are two very different things.
Well, yeah, that's for sure. And that's where the lawyers come in. So Mr. Arnaud hired this team of lawyers to help him enforce the judgment. But instead of going after Death Row directly, they took a little detour, a very suspicious detour, into a whole other lawsuit in New York.
And this is where it gets a little tricky, right? The case file mentions something called Organized Crime Family, Inc. I mean, come on. That name alone sends shivers down my spine.
Yeah, I understand why. It turns out that Mr. Arnaud's lawyers got him involved in this New York lawsuit alongside this organization. And as part of a settlement in that lawsuit, they convinced him to sign a release. But here's the catch. That release transferred all of his rights to that $25 million judgment to Organized Crime Family, Inc.
So they basically tricked him into signing away his rights to the money he was owed. This is unbelievable.
It's incredibly shady. But unfortunately, it's not all that uncommon, and that's why it is so important to understand the terms of any legal document you sign. In this case, the release was the key, because it legally allowed for the transfer of Mr. Arnaud's claim to that judgment.
So he won this massive judgment against Death Row, and he ended up with nothing.
It appears that way, at least based on these excerpts. And it really does raise some serious questions about the ethical obligations of the lawyers involved here.
I mean, you would think that lawyers would be required to act in their client's best interest.
Oh, well, you would think that. And generally, that is a fundamental principle
Yeah.
of legal ethics. But this case really underscores the potential for conflicts of interest, especially when lawyers are representing multiple parties that might have competing interests.
And there's more, right? The case file also mentions a separate federal lawsuit, and this one involves Tupac Shakur's mother, Afeni Shakur, and some disputes over master recordings. What's the connection there?
Well, this is where it gets even more tangled, it turns out. That Mr. Arnaud's lawyers were representing Organized Crime Family, Inc. in that federal lawsuit as well. So they were essentially working for both sides. They were working for the organization. That now held the rights to Mr. Arnaud's judgment, and they were also representing the entity that he was indirectly fighting against in the federal case.
Okay, so they not only potentially misled him into signing away his rights, but they were also representing the other side. This is insane. That's a huge conflict of interest. It really makes you wonder if they were ever truly looking out for his interests.
It's a very valid point. This case really makes you think about who they were truly serving in this whole ordeal. And this case really shows why you need to be so cautious when you are choosing your legal representation, especially when you're talking about these large sums of money.
It's really shocking. And I bet some of you out there are thinking, could this happen to me? And the truth is, similar situations do arise, especially in industries like the music industry, where royalty disputes are so common.
Yeah, it's important to be aware of the potential red flags if you're ever in a situation where you feel like your lawyer isn't acting in your best interest, or if you feel pressured to sign something that you don't fully understand. Don't hesitate to get a second opinion.
Yeah, and we're not just talking about music royalties here, right? This applies to any situation where you're dealing with contracts, especially those involving significant financial stakes. Always take the time to read everything carefully, ask questions, and never be afraid to push back if something doesn't feel right.
I completely agree. This case is a stark reminder that legal documents can have really far-reaching consequences, and it highlights the importance of being proactive and being informed.
But wait, there's even more to this story. Mr. Macha, one of the lawyers involved, he tried to pull a fast one by forcing the malpractice case into arbitration. But then he refused to pay his share of the fees, and it completely stalled the whole process. And then things took a really unexpected turn.
Oh boy, what happened?
He declared bankruptcy, hoping to wipe the slate clean, including the debts related to the malpractice lawsuit. But as we'll see in part 2, it wasn't that simple.
I can't wait to hear what happened.
This is a case that just keeps on giving. So stay tuned for part 2 of our deep dive, where we'll uncover what happened next and explore the legal complexities of bankruptcy and how they impacted Mr. Arnaud's fight for justice. Welcome back, everybody. So we're picking up where we left off. Mr. Machow, one of the lawyers in this crazy case, he had just declared bankruptcy, hoping that would somehow magically erase all of his legal troubles.
It really makes you wonder, can you really just declare bankruptcy and get rid of debts like that?
That was my first thought, too. Especially when you're talking about debts. That could be linked to something as serious as malpractice. It can't be that easy.
Oh, yeah. Bankruptcy laws are designed to give people a fresh start. But it's not a free pass. There are certain types of debts that are typically not dischargeable in bankruptcy, meaning they can't just be wiped away.
And that includes debts that are incurred through fraudulent activities, right? Which seems to be a key issue in this case.
You got it. Remember how? Mr. Arnaud was allegedly misled about the consequences of that release he signed and how his lawyers were potentially operating with a major conflict of interest.
Yeah, so basically the court was saying, nice try, Mr. Machet, but you can't just escape accountability by filing for bankruptcy, especially if there's potential fraud involved.
That's exactly right. The court ultimately ruled that those debts related to the malpractice case were not going to be discharged. Through the bankruptcy filing, they saw right through it. It was clearly an attempt to evade responsibility.
So it seems like Mr. Machet's plan backfired in a big way, and there's another detail in the case files that really struck me as particularly sneaky.
What's that?
Well, when Mr. Machet filed for bankruptcy, he conveniently forgot to include Mr. Arnaud on his list of creditors.
Oh, wow.
It seems like a blatant attempt to keep Mr. Arnaud in the dark and prevent him from challenging the attempt to discharge the debt.
Yeah, that omission was a major red flag for the court. It meant that Mr. Arnaud wasn't properly notified about the bankruptcy proceedings and had no chance to object to Mr. Machet's attempt to wipe away the debt that he owed him.
And this is a crucial point for anyone out there listening. If you're ever named as a creditor in someone's bankruptcy case, make sure you understand your rights and take the necessary steps to protect your interests.
Absolutely. Don't just ignore those notices. You have the right to participate in the process.
Right.
And make sure your claim is properly addressed.
So back to the case. The court's decision to vacate the order for arbitration because of that bankruptcy filing and because of the potential for fraud, that was a huge win for Mr. Arnaud, wasn't it?
It was a major victory. The court recognized that Mr. Bradshaw wasn't playing fair, and they took action to prevent him from further manipulating the legal system to his advantage.
I mean, this case, it's full of twists and turns. It makes you wonder if justice delayed is truly justice denied.
It's a valid concern. And unfortunately, legal battles can drag on for years, especially when tactics like these are employed to delay the process.
But for Mr. Arnaud, this ruling meant that the malpractice case could finally move forward, right?
That's right. It cleared the way for him to finally have his day in court and seek accountability for the alleged wrongdoing by his lawyers.
But there's one big question that's still looming. Did he ever actually get the money he was owed? That $25 million judgment against Death Row Records?
That's what we all want to know, right?
And this is where the case files you provided kind of leave us hanging. The excerpts don't detail the outcome of that original lawsuit. So frustrating.
It just goes to show that legal battles can be incredibly complex and very unpredictable. Even when you win key rulings along the way, there's no guarantee of a clean and satisfying ending.
It's a reminder that the legal system is often about navigating a series of hurdles and fighting for every inch of progress. But even without knowing the final outcome of the lawsuit, we can still learn a lot from this case. And that's what we'll focus on as we head into the final part of our deep dive.
I'm looking forward to it.
Great. I'm ready to unpack those key takeaways and explore what they mean for anyone navigating the complexities of legal representation, contracts, and even bankruptcy. Stick around, because this deep dive is far from over.
Okay, so we're back for the final part of our deep dive into this really wild legal saga. We've seen how Mr. Arnaud's quest to collect his $25 million judgment took some pretty unexpected turns involving shady settlements, potential conflicts of interest, and even a bankruptcy filing that backfired.
It's really quite a story. And while the case files that you sent over don't really reveal the ultimate outcome of that original lawsuit against Death Row Records, this case still offers some valuable lessons, I think, for all of us.
Yeah, absolutely. So what are the biggest things you think we can all kind of learn from Mr. Arnaud's experience? What should our listeners really be thinking about, especially if they ever find themselves in a similar situation? Well, I think first and foremost, this case is a cautionary tale about choosing your legal representation very carefully. You're entrusting your lawyer with your legal rights and potentially your financial well-being. It's not something to take lightly.
It's a big deal. Yeah, you can't just assume that all lawyers are going to automatically act in your best interest. This case really highlights the importance of doing your research and asking the right questions before you sign on that dotted line.
I couldn't agree more. Don't just go with the first lawyer you find or the one that seems the most charismatic. Take some time to vet them thoroughly. Check their credentials, their experience in the specific area of law that you need help with, and look for any red flags.
Like what kind of red flags? What are some signs? That should make people pause and reconsider.
Well, a big one is if a lawyer seems expectant, overly eager to get you to sign a contract without really fully explaining the terms, or if they just dismiss your concerns or brush off your questions.
Basically, if your gut is telling you something is off, you should listen to it. Don't be afraid to walk away and find someone that you feel more comfortable with.
Absolutely. You need to feel confident that your lawyer understands your needs and will advocate for your best interests. And remember, you're the client. You have the right to ask questions. You have the right to push back. And you have the right to seek a second opinion if something doesn't feel right.
This case also highlights the importance of really understanding any contract or legal document before you sign it.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, that release that Mr. Arnaud signed ended up having huge consequences. Read every single word. If there's anything that you don't understand, ask for clarification. And don't be afraid to have another lawyer. Review the documents, especially if it's a really complex agreement or involves a lot of money.
Knowledge is your best defense in these situations. The more you understand about your rights, the better equipped you'll be to protect yourself.
That's the bottom line.
And this case also touched on another complex area that we should all be aware of. Bankruptcy. It's not a simple process. And it doesn't always work the way people assume it might.
Yeah, Mr. Machad's attempt to use bankruptcy as a shield definitely backfired. It's a good reminder that certain debts, especially those related to fraud, aren't so easily erased.
So the key takeaway here is to be informed, to be proactive, and to never be afraid to ask for help if you need it.
Yeah, couldn't have said it better myself. Mr. Arnaud's story, even without knowing the final resolution, is a powerful reminder that the legal system can be a complex and sometimes treacherous landscape. But with the right knowledge and the right approach, you can navigate it more effectively and protect your interests.
So as we wrap up our deep dive into this fascinating case, what's the one piece of advice you would give our listeners based on everything we've talked about today?
I would say this. When it comes to legal matters, don't be passive. Be informed, be engaged, and be your own advocate. Ask questions, do your research, and don't be afraid to seek professional guidance when you need it.
Great advice. And if this deep dive has sparked your curiosity about legal issues, contracts, or even bankruptcy, remember you can always reach out to us with your questions and thoughts using the show's hashtag. We love hearing from you.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. Until next time, stay informed and stay empowered. All right, so today we're diving into this pretty wild legal case. It's a story about free speech and racketeering and those boof royalties that I think we all kind of dream of.
Oh, yeah.
But this one centers on a name you'll probably recognize. Salvatore Sammy the Bull Gravano.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, that's Sammy the Bull, the Gambino family underboss.
Right.
Who famously flipped on John Gotti.
Yeah, his story's already got more twists and turns than like a mob movie, right? But it gets even crazier.
Oh, yeah.
So after he serves time for his RHU conviction, Gravano ends up in Arizona.
Oh, wow.
Running an ecstasy ring.
Okay, so not exactly retired and living the quiet life.
I got quiet. And get this, Arizona doesn't just go after his drug money.
No.
They set their sights on something way more interesting. The profits from his autobiography, Underboss.
Oh, wow.
So that's what we're going to be looking at today.
Okay.
Our main source for this deep dive is a 2003 Arizona Court of Appeals ruling
Okay.
that really grapples with this question. Can the government actually seize profits from a book, even if the book itself is totally legal?
Yeah, where's that line between free speech and ill-gotten gains? I mean, that's
It's a fascinating question.
Yeah.
Because we're not just talking about grabbing existing cash here.
right.
Arizona wanted any future profits from Underboss, essentially saying Gravano couldn't benefit from his notoriety even years later.
Wow, so they're going after potential future earnings, not even just what he had
Exactly.
at the time.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay, so to understand how we even got to this point, I think we need to go back to 1991
Okay.
and Gravano's RUCO conviction in New York.
Right.
This wasn't just like some petty crime spree or anything.
Yeah.
We're talking serious offenses here.
Yeah.
Murder, extortion, the whole 9 yards.
Yeah, you got to have that context because the Arizona court really looked at his violent past when deciding if those book profits were basically a result of his criminal activities.
Right.
I mean, think about it this way. Would anyone be clamoring to read a book by, like, Sammy the accountant?
Probably not.
Probably not.
Yeah.
So,
Okay, but here's where it gets really interesting. I think New York actually had this law called the Son of Sam law.
right.
And it was aimed at preventing criminals from profiting off their crimes by like writing books or making movies about it. But it didn't actually apply to Gravano
Really? Why not?
because his conviction was federal, not state.
Oh, interesting. So that leaves the door open for Arizona to step in with their own approach,
Okay.
which we'll see is quite different.
Okay.
So fast forward to 2000, Gravano gets arrested in Arizona,
Okay.
and they hit him with their racketeering and forfeiture laws.
Okay. But like we said, they don't just go after his money.
Right.
They target any potential future benefits from Underboss. And Gravano fights back hard. He's saying this is like a direct attack on his First Amendment rights.
Yeah, I mean,
His argument.
they're punishing him for the content of his speech.
And that's where this whole legal battle really gets going.
Yeah.
Boils down to Gravano saying, hey, I wrote a book and you're taking my money because you don't like what I said.
Right. But Arizona's claiming their laws are content neutral.
Content neutral. Okay, so what does that actually mean in this context, though?
Well, it means that the law itself doesn't target specific opinions
Right.
or viewpoints,
Right.
but it might have this like side effect of impacting someone's speech. It's a tricky concept.
It is, yeah.
I'll give you an example.
Yeah.
Imagine someone could just seize your blog income
Oh, wow.
because of something unrelated you did like years ago.
Yeah.
Suddenly it hits a little closer to home.
Yeah, that's a little unsettling, for
Yeah,
sure.
Right.
So, okay, if Arizona's laws are supposed to be content neutral, how do they justify going after Gravano's book profits then?
Well, they had a few main points.
Okay.
First, deterring crime, obviously.
Makes sense.
compensating victims,
Okay.
and preventing criminals from profiting, period.
Okay.
Their argument was that these goals are content neutral.
Right.
It doesn't matter if you made money from a business or whatever.
Right.
If it's tied to illegal activity, they can go after it.
Okay. But they go even further. They do. With this thing called a but-for test of causation.
Oh, yeah.
Essentially saying Gravano wouldn't even have a book deal but for his criminal notoriety.
Yeah.
It's what made the book sellable.
Exactly. I mean, you don't see too many reformed mob bosses writing romance novels under a pseudonym, do you?
That's true.
His whole persona, his brand, if you will, was built on being Sammy the Bull.
Underboss isn't even just about crime. It's filled with details of the crimes.
Yeah, the content is tied to his past.
Yeah, it's like inherently tied to his past.
Which raises a point that might be interesting for you. Think about true crime podcasts or documentaries.
Yeah.
They're profiting in a way from stories of wrongdoing, too.
Yeah.
Does that make them exploitative?
That's a really interesting question.
Yeah.
We could probably do a whole other deep dive on that.
We could.
But for now, let's get back to Gravano.
All right.
One of his arguments was that Arizona had no right to take his money because his crimes happened in New York.
Oh, so he's saying they were overstepping, trying to punish him for crimes committed somewhere else.
Yeah, essentially, what did Arizona have to do with it?
Well, Arizona saw it differently.
Okay.
They argued that organized crime is a nationwide problem, and that stopping criminals from enjoying their profits no matter where they are serves a broader purpose.
Right. It's like you can't just move to a new state and expect a clean slate when it comes to profiting off your past.
Exactly, especially if those profits are tied to your crimes.
Right. And we can't forget that Arizona also has an interest in protecting their own residents, even from criminals who came from out of state.
Of course.
So their argument seems pretty solid so far. But Gravano also claimed that Arizona's law was way too broad.
Okay.
Like he said it was basically just a rebranded Son of Sam law.
Yeah, which the Supreme Court had already struck down.
Exactly.
Huh?
So how did Arizona respond to that?
Well, they pointed out some key differences.
Okay.
Their law was more specific.
Okay.
It targeted proceeds that were directly traceable to racketeering.
So not just any mention of a crime in any book.
Exactly. It was about the source of the profits.
Not about censorship.
Precisely. And also, Arizona's law had these built-in protections to make sure there was due process.
Okay.
They couldn't just take Gravano's money.
Right.
They had to prove their case in court.
Right. It wasn't a free-for-all on anyone who just happened to mention a crime in their work.
Right.
But hold on, there's one last piece of this puzzle we got to understand before we can see how this all played out.
Yeah.
Jurisdiction. How did Arizona courts even have the authority to rule on this in the first place?
That's where it gets a little technical.
Okay.
But it comes down to a few things.
Okay.
First, Gravano was living in Arizona at the time.
Okay.
Second, those royalties were being held in Arizona at his request.
Gotcha.
And third, intangible things like contract rights are generally considered to be located where the owner lives.
So basically, even though his crimes were in New York, his Arizona residency gave them jurisdiction. So they had him right where they needed him to apply their laws.
They did.
But did they actually manage to get his book money in the end?
That's the big question, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yes, in the end, they did. The court upheld that forfeiture of Gravano's royalties. It was a big win for Arizona.
Yeah.
And it really set a precedent for anyone looking to profit off a criminal past.
It kind of makes you think, though, this case really shows that constant push and pull between individual expression, even about a criminal past, and society's interest in making sure crime doesn't actually pay.
Absolutely. And it's not even just about the money itself. It's about the potential for fame, for turning a criminal lifestyle into something almost glamorous or aspirational.
Exactly.
This ruling forces us to look at some uncomfortable truths.
Yeah.
Like the fact that our own fascination with true crime can sometimes benefit the very people who committed the crimes.
Right. Let's be honest. Underboss probably wouldn't have been nearly as popular if it was written by, like, I don't know, a retired librarian.
Probably not.
It was Gravano's notoriety
Yeah.
that drew people in.
That's the irony, isn't it?
Yeah.
His past is what made his story so compelling.
Mm-hmm.
And that's exactly what Arizona was aiming to penalize.
But then that raises some other questions, too. Are we saying that anyone who's committed a crime can never write about their experiences?
Right.
What about redemption? Couldn't these stories actually serve as cautionary tales?
Those are all really valid points. It's crucial to understand that the court wasn't making some like hard and fast rule here.
Right.
They made a specific decision
Okay.
based on Gravano and his case.
Right. And they focused on that direct connection between his racketeering and the actual content of Underboss.
Right. It wasn't some casual mention. It
Yeah.
was the core of the book.
So that suggests that there might be situations where someone could write about your past without getting into the same legal hot water.
Potentially, yeah.
Like, what if a former criminal wrote a fictional novel that's inspired by their experiences but not directly profiting from the crimes?
It's possible.
Okay.
Of course, each case is going to be judged on its own merits.
Right.
And there's always room for different legal interpretations.
Of course, we're not lawyers here.
Right.
But this case definitely set a precedent, at least in Arizona,
Yeah.
for how courts view profits connected to stories about criminal past.
Absolutely. And it has implications beyond just book royalties, too.
Oh, yeah. Like what?
Think about movie rights.
Oh, yeah.
Speaking engagements.
Yeah.
Even merchandise.
Okay, so basically, any way someone could profit from their notoriety
Right.
that's tied to their criminal activities could be subject to forfeiture.
Exactly.
Wow.
This ruling probably made a lot of true crime creators rethink their approach.
I bet.
But there's another group we haven't really talked about yet. The victims.
Oh, yeah. Where do they fit into all of this?
Well, remember, one of Arizona's main goals was to compensate victims, and they pointed out that Gravano's book basically glorifying his crimes could be really painful for the people he actually harmed.
Yeah, that's a really good point. It shifts the focus away from Gravano's free speech
Right.
and toward the victim's right to justice and healing.
Exactly.
It also brings up the question about the ethics
Yeah.
of profiting off of stories that involve real victims. Is it ever okay
Yeah.
to turn someone else's suffering into entertainment or financial gain?
That's something we as a society really need to grapple with.
Especially because these lines are getting blurrier and blurrier.
They are.
I mean, true crime is everywhere these days. Books, movies, podcasts, documentaries.
And while a lot of those are trying to shed light on important issues,
Yeah.
there's always a risk of exploitation, of sensationalizing violence, of reducing complex human stories to just entertainment.
It is a fine line to walk, for sure.
Yeah.
This case really highlights how our interest in true crime can sometimes come at a cost.
It challenges us to think about who benefits from these stories
Yeah.
and who might be harmed.
And it reminds us that even something as fundamental as freedom of speech
Yeah.
isn't absolute.
Yeah.
There are limits,
There are.
especially when it comes to profiting off criminal activity.
And those limits are constantly evolving as society changes. And we kind of rethink what justice and accountability really mean.
So what does all this mean for you, the listener?
Right. What can you take away from this?
Yeah.
Well, I think it means being a more aware consumer of true crime.
Yeah.
Ask yourself, where are those profits going?
Mhm.
Are the victims being treated respectfully?
Think about that ethical side of turning real-life tragedies into entertainment.
Right.
Is it being done responsibly?
Is he giving a voice to the victims?
Yeah.
Or just exploiting their pain?
And recognize that freedom of speech
Right.
can sometimes bump up against the pursuit of justice.
It's true.
This case might have been decided back in 2003,
Yeah.
but the questions it raises are more relevant than ever.
Absolutely. Especially in a world where true crime is everywhere you look.
Exactly.
Yeah.
The stories we tell and how we profit from them have real consequences.
Yeah.
And those consequences ripple outward far beyond any courtroom.
You know, before we wrap up, I want to touch on something we mentioned earlier.
Okay.
That whole question of jurisdiction.
Okay.
It might seem like a technicality,
Yeah,
but it was really key to the outcome of this case.
it was. The fact that Gravano was in Arizona
Yeah.
and his royalties were being held there,
Right.
that gave those courts the authority to apply their laws.
We're not just talking about physical property either. It's
Yeah.
intangible things like contract rights. And those rights are usually thought of as existing where the owner lives.
So even though his crimes were in New York, his Arizona residency gave them jurisdiction.
Exactly.
It's like you can't just move to a new state and totally outrun your past.
Right. It really speaks to how far-reaching these laws can be. And the commitment to stopping criminals from benefiting from their crimes, regardless of where the money comes from.
So just to bring it all together,
Yeah.
the court decided that Gravano's book profits were essentially fruits of his illegal activities, and they were justified in seizing them.
And that ruling sent a strong message.
Yeah.
Not just for criminals who write books,
Yeah.
but for anyone who tries to profit from past wrongdoing.
It really makes you think about, okay, so we've gone through all the legal stuff and the precedents and even some of those ethical questions. But this case really gets down to one basic question, doesn't it?
It does.
Where do we draw the line?
Exactly. Should anyone be allowed to profit from their past, even indirectly?
Yeah.
And what about the people they hurt? How do we make sure their voices are heard?
It's easy to get caught up in, the excitement of a true crime story.
Oh, yeah.
But this case reminds us there are real people involved.
Absolutely.
Real consequences behind those stories.
And I think as consumers of true crime, we have to be more aware.
Yeah.
Think about where the money's going.
Right.
Are the victims being treated with respect?
Is the story being told responsibly?
Exactly. Is it shedding light on injustice? Or is it just exploiting their pain for entertainment?
It's a tough balance to strike.
It is.
We want to protect free speech.
Right.
But we also want to make sure justice is served.
Mm-hmm.
And that victims aren't forgotten.
This case might seem unique.
Yeah.
But it really shows this bigger problem.
Mm-hmm.
This relationship between free speech, the pursuit of justice, and our fascination with true crime.
And those lines are only going to get blurrier.
Oh, yeah.
With technology and more stories being shared.
We have to be careful about how we engage with those narratives.
Mm-hmm.
Think about the impact they can have on people and society as a whole.
So as we finish up this deep dive, we hope we've given you some things to think about.
I hope so.
This wasn't just about a mobster and his book.
It was about a much bigger conversation we have to have as a society.
It's about expression and accountability.
Right.
Entertainment and ethics.
And I think that's a conversation we all need to be part of.
Well said. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.
Absolutely.
We'll see you next time for another one. It's amazing what you can find buried in a single document, right? Like this criminal complaint you sent over. It's like you pull on one thread and bam, a whole other layer of this story starts to unravel.
Oh, absolutely.
So today, that thread we're tugging on is any mention we can find of WAC 100.
Right.
To see if we can shed some light on this whole indictment. Now listen, we're not about jumping to conclusions or going beyond what's right here in front of us, but every single time his name pops up, we got to analyze it. What's the context? What does it tell us about his potential role, if any, in this whole mess? Yeah,
you hit the nail on the head. We've got a very specific task here.
Mm-hmm.
We are looking at how WAC 100 figures into this case against Eugene Henley Jr. and the others named in this document. And that's it. We're drawing a line right there.
Right.
We're not speculating beyond the information provided in this criminal complaint. We're sticking to what we have. So we're going to be analyzing the nature of his appearances in this document and what they might imply about his responsibility or even his potential involvement in the alleged criminal activities.
Okay. So first mention of WAC 100 that we stumbled across relates to this robbery back on July 5th, 2021.
Okay.
Now, this went down at a marijuana dispensary where someone identified as Victim 1 worked.
Okay.
And the complaint dives into how Victim 1, it seems, had been extorted for years by the Big U enterprise, but then something changed. They stopped making those payments.
Right.
And it looks like this robbery was a direct response to that.
Yeah, it seems that way. The complaint states that it was a large group of Big U enterprise members that participated in this robbery. And they got away with a pretty substantial amount of cash and marijuana.
Yeah.
But here's where things take a very interesting turn during this armed robbery. Victim 1 ends up speaking with Henley himself on the phone.
Wait, really? During the robbery? That's wild.
Yeah, and it gets even weirder because Henley invites Victim 1 to his house a little while later and proceeds to return a portion of the stolen money.
No way. That's insane. It's like a robbery followed by an act of generosity. Like, what is going on?
It's definitely not your typical robbery scenario, and this strange turn of events brings us to the next piece of this puzzle. One of the individuals involved in that robbery, a guy named Williams, who we learn is Henley's self-proclaimed right-hand man, later spoke about this whole thing on the No Jumper podcast.
Okay.
Now, he corroborated Victim 1's account of showing up at Henley's place while they were all counting the loot, and he confirmed that Henley did indeed decide to return about $40,000.
Wow. Okay, so this is where WAC 100 makes his entrance, right?
Right.
Because according to the complaint, he was also on that No Jumper episode.
That's right. And what's interesting is the complaint points out that he's a figure within the Bloods,
right,
who are often considered rivals to the groups Henley is associated with.
Yeah.
So he's providing a bit of an outside perspective.
Absolutely. And the complaint actually quotes WAC 100 directly.
Okay.
It says, he said this, and I quote, "You know why he wanted to give the dude back the $40, right? Because he was going to make the dude give him $20 for getting it back."
It's a cynical take, but potentially insightful.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, it casts a whole new light on Henley's actions.
It's crazy,
Yeah.
right?
Uh,
It completely changes how you see that whole thing. Henley returning the money, it wasn't out of the goodness of his heart. Like,
Right,
it's like,
right.
oh no, he's playing some kind of long game here.
It really throws a wrench into this idea of Henley being the good guy, you know? And the fact that this perspective is coming from a rival figure from a different gang, it really says a lot about the dynamics at play here.
Oh yeah, it's like in that world, nothing is what it seems like. You can't just take things at face value.
It suggests this underlying current where everything is transactional,
Mm,
where seemingly altruistic acts might actually have hidden agendas.
absolutely.
It's a perspective likely informed by the complex history and interactions between these groups.
Makes you think. And the fallout from this No Jumper podcast episode, that's pretty telling too.
Oh, yeah. How so?
So the complaint states that rapper RR actually did end up delivering that $50,000 in one of the alleged incidents that Williams talked about. But then guess what?
What?
Henley cuts off all communication with Williams and doesn't share any of the money.
Wow.
Henley hit No Jumper with a cease and desist order to try and get that episode taken down.
Oh, really?
Now, a recording's still out there online, but that reaction from Henley, it kind of tells you he didn't want that story getting out.
He definitely seems sensitive about it. So let's circle back to WAC 100's statement.
Yeah.
It's important to remember that based on this document, at least he was not directly involved in the robbery itself.
Right.
His role, as it's presented here, is that of an outsider looking in, offering his take on Henley's motivations.
Exactly. It's like he's giving color commentary on his rival's actions from afar. But again, just to be crystal clear, based on what we've got here in this complaint, it doesn't look like WAC 100 is actually involved in the crimes listed in this indictment.
Agreed, but let's just make absolutely sure we haven't missed anything.
Okay.
Does his name come up anywhere else in this criminal complaint in relation to any of the other alleged crimes, like you mentioned, the murder?
Yeah.
The other extortion claims any fraud stuff we need to be thorough here.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So besides that whole No Jumper thing, any other connections or interactions between WAC 100 and Henley or any of the other people named in this indictment?
Well, when you really come through this document, there are a couple more instances where WAC 100's name does pop up.
Okay.
Most notably, there's a part where Henley allegedly threatened to beat the shit out of someone called Witness 2.
Yeah.
Because he thought Witness 2 was starting shit between Henley and WAC 100.
Interesting. So not exactly buddies, then more like adversaries.
It paints a picture of conflict, maybe even animosity between the two. And there's another part that mentions Henley bragging to Victim 1 about an incident where he and members of the Rollin 60s, another gang, supposedly chased down WAC 100.
Really?
So again, this reinforces this idea of a tense, potentially violent relationship between Henley and WAC 100.
Okay.
Which further suggests WAC 100's not part of Henley's alleged criminal enterprise, at least based on what we're seeing here.
So putting all these pieces together, the podcast commentary, the threat against Witness 2, and now this alleged chase, it seems like WAC 100's involvement in this whole thing is more about him being talked about by Henley.
Right.
And then him kind of offering his perspective on things from the outside looking in.
That's a solid summary based solely on this criminal complaint. WAC 100's role seems to be that of an observer, a commentator, and even someone who is targeted by Henley.
But not someone actually taking part in the crimes themselves.
Exactly.
So for you listening at home, the key takeaway here is this WAC 100 is definitely mentioned in this criminal complaint. The picture it paints of him is as this external figure. He's commenting on things. He's even a target of some of the individuals involved, but he's not directly participating in the criminal activities that this document outlines.
Precisely. And it's crucial to remember that our analysis here is limited to this one document. There could be other information, other documents, other perspectives that could tell a completely different story.
And that brings us to a pretty thought-provoking question for all of you listening out there. We've seen that WAC 100 is painted as a rival to Henley in this complaint, but he also seems to have some insider knowledge of Henley's alleged methods.
Yeah.
So what does that tell us about how things work in this world?
That's a good question.
Like, how does information travel between these rival factions? And what does it mean that even someone who's seemingly on the opposite side can have these insights into how things operate?
Yeah, it really highlights how interconnected these groups can be even when they're rivals. It makes you think about reputations, how patterns of behavior become known, and how information spreads and gets interpreted within these circles. It also raises the question of how valuable these external perspectives can be, even if they might be biased.
Definitely food for thought.
Yeah, it encourages us all to think critically and to keep digging for more information. There might be other pieces of the puzzle out there just waiting to be discovered.
Absolutely. All right, folks, keep those questions coming. And as always, thanks for joining us on this deep dive.
Thanks, everyone.
All right, strap in, everybody. Today we're going deep on Freeway, Ricky Ross, the drug lord, not the rapper, although they do kind of cross paths later. Wild story. We got his book here and some background from Wikipedia. Ready to go.
It's a fascinating deep dive because Ross's story isn't just his. It really gets into the whole crack epidemic, the Iran-Contra affair, like a snapshot of a whole era in America, you know?
Yeah, it's kind of mind-blowing how one guy can be tied into so much. Okay, so we start in South Central LA. Ricky Ross, good at tennis, aiming for a college scholarship, right?
Yeah, really talented. But there's this, well, a problem. Ross couldn't read, so no college.
Man, that's rough. Like, literacy can make or break your future that young.
It shows how the system's stacked against some people. And for some, like Ross, the drug game seems like the only way up, even though it's obviously dangerous.
Right, so that's what he does. Starts small time, learning the trade, get this from an upholstery teacher. I mean, you can't make this up. But he was ambitious right from the start.
Oh, yeah. He had, like, natural business smarts, even dealing drugs. Went from grams to ounces to kilos to a whole network across cities.
And then everything changes when he meets Danilo Blandon.
Blandon, he was Nicaraguan, exiled, and he had connections to some seriously cheap, pure cocaine, like way better than what Ross had seen. That connection, it changed everything for him. He could undercut everybody and just flood the market.
Wait, hold on. Nicaraguan exile, 1980s. We're talking Iran-Contra now, right?
Oh, yeah, we're going there. This is where Ross's story gets into global politics and secret stuff. Gotta give a little context here. Iran-Contra, huge scandal during Reagan's time. U.S. selling weapons to Iran, trying to get hostages back.
And this is when we weren't supposed to sell them anything,
Yeah.
right? Embargo and all that.
Exactly. But it gets even crazier. The money from those arms deals, it went to the Contras, these rebels fighting in Nicaragua. Congress said no way to funding them, but Reagan's people found ways around that.
So how does Blandon, Ross's cocaine guy, fit into this?
Okay, this is where it's murky. This journalist, Gary Webb, in his Dark Alliance articles, he said Blandon was part of this network, bringing cocaine to the U.S. The money, it went to the Contras.
Hold up, you're saying Freeway. Ricky Ross, without knowing, might have been part of a CIA drug operation to fund a secret war. Sounds like a movie.
It does make you wonder about, the government's role in the drug trade and what they were willing to do back then.
Wow, this is getting complex fast. So Ross, possibly linked to this massive scandal, is building his empire.
Yeah.
How big did this thing get?
Huge. Millions a day, thousands of employees, that's what they say. He was smart about it, using police scanners and stuff, made deals with gangs like the Bloods and Crips to move his product.
Like the Kingpin, the cocaine CEO.
Mm-hmm.
But there's this thing in his book that surprised me. It wasn't all about money and power for him.
Yeah, what's interesting is that Ross did some things with his money that you wouldn't expect. Like, it showed there was more to him than just being a ruthless criminal.
Like investing in Anita Baker's first album. It's a detail that makes you think, this guy built his empire on cocaine, but also had a thing for music. Saw something in this young artist.
It shows he's complicated. People are rarely just one thing, even when they're involved in stuff like this.
Right. So we've got ambition, history, and maybe even a tie-in to a huge scandal. And this is just the start. We haven't even gotten to his arrest, the legal fights, or the rapper with the same name.
Oh, yeah, we're just getting started. There's a lot more to uncover here.
Okay, so last we left off, Freeway. Ricky Ross is at the top, millions coming in, maybe even tangled up with Cold War stuff. But empires, they don't last forever.
Oh.
Ross, he got busted in '96.
Yeah, big sting operation. Tried to buy like over 100 kilos of cocaine from an undercover agent, and because of his past convictions, he got hit with life in prison. California's 3 strikes law, that's what did it.
The 3 strikes law. I know the name, but refresh my memory. What did that all about?
Basically, you get convicted of 3 felonies. Doesn't even matter if the third one is small time. You're looking at life in prison. Supposed to be for career criminals, repeat offenders.
So it could really nail someone who messed up early in life, even if they went straight later.
That's the criticism. People say it's too harsh, doesn't look at each case fairly. Some say it scares people straight, others say it's just plain unfair.
Well, for Ross, it was like, that's it, game over. But here's the twist. In prison, he learns to read.
Yeah, not only that, he gets into the legal system, studied law books like hardcore.
Hold on, drug lord turned jailhouse lawyer. What did he find?
He thought he found a loophole, how they used the three strikes law on him, appealed his sentence, said his old convictions shouldn't count for a life term. The way the law was written, it was tricky.
And guess what? They reduced his sentence to 20 years. Got out in 2009. Shows you, even when it seems hopeless, things can change.
Makes you think, right? About the whole justice system, especially that three strikes law. Is it really about fairness or just punishing people no matter what?
Heavy stuff. But his legal troubles weren't over. Remember the other Rick Ross, the rapper? Their stories, they collide in this crazy legal battle.
This is where hip-hop, copyright, and what it means to be a person all come together. Freeway gets out, finds this rapper using his name, making it big.
I bet he wasn't happy about that.
Nope. Felt like the rapper was cashing in on his life, stealing his name, his whole identity, said his publicity rights were being violated.
Publicity rights? Sounds like lawyer talk. What does that even mean?
Basically, you have the right to control how your name, your picture, your likeness is used to make money. No one can profit off you without your okay.
So did Freeway have a case?
It was a tough one. The rapper's name was the same, his music talked about drug dealing, he even acted like a kingpin, kind of.
But he's an artist, right? Can't he get inspiration from real life?
That's where the First Amendment comes in. The rapper, with Jay-Z backing him up, they said it was artistic expression, free speech, protected.
So it's like one guy's right to his own name against an artist's right to create. Who won?
The rapper. The court said using the name Rick Ross was art, protected by the First Amendment, and that he wasn't directly making money off the real Rick Ross.
Tough break for Freeway. But even after that, after all those years locked up, he didn't just disappear.
He reinvented himself, wrote his autobiography, tried managing boxers, even got into the legal marijuana business.
Like he's trying to build a legit empire now, just like his old one.
It's interesting, right? Makes you think about redemption. Can someone like Ross, with his past, really change? Can they actually do good in the world? Big questions for all of us to think about.
Before we get into all that, Ross, looking back on his life, what he's doing now, there's that one thing we got to address. The Iran-Contra affair, that claim that he was part of a CIA drug operation, even if he didn't know it. We got to go deeper on that.
Okay.
So we've talked about Freeway, Ricky Ross's rise, his fall, the legal stuff, his second act. Now we've got to circle back to this whole Iran-Contra thing. Feels like a spy movie.
It does, doesn't it? Remember Blandon, Ross's Nicaraguan supplier, the guy with the cheap, high-quality cocaine? Well, this is where Gary Webb's work comes in.
Dark alliance, right? The articles that said the CIA was tied to cocaine trafficking, funding the Contras in Nicaragua.
That's the one. Webb said Blandon was part of this whole network bringing cocaine into the U.S., and that the money, it went to the Contras, even though Congress said no way to funding them.
So Webb's saying Ross was basically caught in the middle, benefiting from this cheap cocaine from Blandon, who was supposedly linked to the CIA? That's a pretty big accusation.
Huge. It really shook things up, made people question the whole war on drugs, like the government fighting drugs but maybe helping traffickers at the same time, all for some political goal.
But I remember hearing that Webb's work was really controversial. Not everyone believed it, right?
True, it was groundbreaking, but people really scrutinized it. Other journalists, they questioned his methods, his evidence. The CIA, they went after him hard. And the media, well, they kind of backed off the story after a while.
It's actually pretty sad. Webb, he ended up quitting his job at the newspaper. And a few years later, he took his own life. It shows the risks that these investigative journalists take, when they go up against powerful people.
No doubt. Really makes you think about what's at stake when you try to find the truth. And even now, we still don't know everything about how involved the CIA was with drug trafficking back then. Some people, they believe Webb 100% that he exposed something really dark about the U.S. government. Others think his reporting was flawed, exaggerated the whole thing.
So where does that leave us? More questions than answers, it seems like.
Yeah, kind of. But that's part of why Freeway Ricky Ross's story is so interesting. It makes us think about history, Makes us question what we're told. And it shows us that things aren't always black and white.
The world's complicated, right?
For sure. And whether you agree with Dark Alliance or not, Ross's story shows how drugs, politics, global stuff, it's all connected. And it raises these tough questions. Like, what's the real cost of the war on drugs? And what happens when governments do things in secret?
Well, we've covered a lot. From South Central to drug lord to prison to maybe being tied to a Cold War scandal. What's the takeaway here? What should people think about after this deep dive?
The big thing is, even a story that seems simple, It can be way more complex when you dig in. Ross's life, yeah, it's unique, but it also shows how society, history, they shape people's lives. Not just his, but so many others.
You start to see that people's choices, they're tied to bigger problems. Poverty, lack of opportunity, the temptation of easy money, even if it's from illegal stuff.
Definitely. It's a reminder to question things, to look at different viewpoints. The world's not always what it seems.
So for anyone listening who wants to know more, where should they start?
Ross's book, Freeway Rick Ross, The Untold Autobiography, is a good one. He tells his own story, talks about the drug trade, what he thinks about it all now.
And if you want to go deeper on Iran-Contra, there are tons of books, documentaries, you name it. Fascinating part of history, even if it's kind of messed up.
Definitely. And for anyone interested in the whole war on drugs, how it affects communities, there's so much info out there. Really important to learn about that and keep talking about it.
We've given you a lot to think about today. The story of Freeway, Ricky Ross. It shows that even in the darkest places, there's humanity, ambition, even redemption. It makes you think about crime, punishment, second chances, all that.
It does. And it leaves us with this question. Can someone who made money illegally, can they really turn their life around? Can they make a difference for the better? Tough questions. But by looking at stories like Ross's, we can start to understand those questions, understand ourselves, understand the world we live in.